izobe rya hati ebintu nibyinje biturkwije ku bantu rebaho kandi turna live abakutureba live aha Facebook abakutureba live aha YouTube abakutureba live aha Twitter ni mwentu bakunda kurunje mnonga mwebare kubayo nambasa kugendo message zanyu ahashongeza mwe na zitari zimwe na zimwe akubasa kubana mwenda gambo nitwe kandi habasa kwija kuba yabo abarukwenda still okubasa kugira icyo ba commentinga ningashi okutwiforminga what is happening in your locality na basa kuba hariyo amakuru agariyo ngagendo mission ago and gendo mission no kubantu reba okutwa kubasa kubantu involving buri kimwe akurebeka mu cyabasa kuba kirungi mnonga so izobe rya hati ebyafaye tinyine byinji ohiro kujangu izoba nkeri omwebembezi Truman owihangeria United States of America hine ebintu ebyagenzero mission no kuba nakora kandi reka tatkireho kutereva aho honyine atugendo mission program ya light focus right about now.
Your imaging is about to change forever. Get inspired by what happened in the past on this date. History will help you to tell the present and the future. Know what happened on this day in the Light Focus program. Introduce now. Where do you get as many options as that? With ABUT, the man of all seasons.
With ABUT, the man of all seasons.
Here's an example. Here's the full mix.
102.9 Light FM.
Okay, ebyafaye bizobe rya hati owabiro mwembezi wihangeria United States of America omwaka gwa 1950 Harry Truman izoba nkeri akabasa kugendo misho nana okublockinga amahe agabire negenda kurugwo mwihangeria United States of America okubasa kugendo misho nana okugira nko kubata banguramu obusinjo bwihanga area Germany aho turi kuhendera World War II ekeya hwire then tukatwatanchire kituru kweta Cold War aho abebembezi babugendo mission na optikirizana anshonga yebtekateko abamwe barukwikereza omunyekereza ya communism abandi barukwikereza omunyekereza ya capitalism kityo cya gendo mission no kubanki baganisamo amahanga agabire ngikiriza na nihangiria America mu ngora yago ya capitalism kandi na nihangiria Russia na namahanga agabire ngagikiriza mu na nenkora yayo ya communism. So briefly ebyo byo byafaye binkubasa kusyaho izobe rya hati turi kugendo mission program Light Focus.
Your imaging is about to change forever. Get inspired by what happened in the past on this date. History will help you to tell the present and the future. Know what happened on this day in the Light Focus program. Introduce now. Where do you get as many options as that? With ABUT, the man of all seasons.
With ABUT, the man of all seasons.
Here's an example. Here's the full mix.
102.9 Light FM.
Alright, tugendo mission na program Light Focus nibanyeta ABUT, a man of all seasons. Turukutandikiraho mu ihanga area Uganda ntureba ko enshonga zo burwire obwa COVID-19 za agenda nizikwatansi na higuru kandi buri zoba nahabaho ekintu kisya ekiri kugendo mission no transpiringa omushongezi kwatirine no burwire obwo omu ihanga area Uganda. Right about now headquarters za polisi omu ihanga area Uganda ezanaguru abagenzero mission nana okuzikinga pashare bukushangwaho hariho abamwe ombakuru ababase kuchebero bakashangwa bino burwire obwa COVID-19. So hati abarukora yone bache kandi nabwe abari a must okubasa kuhika ha workplace hard naguru offices inkuru eza polisi hanga area Uganda okubasa kugendo mission no kora emirimo yabo but abandi abache abemirimo yabo kubasa korerwa muka barukubasa kusa computer na nebindi na internet bariyomba koromka kandi barukugendo mission no kutereza embera. Remember ngu obwiro bwa COVID-19 bukakwatana n'omukuru Hassan Kasinju bunwe political kamisa owa polisi kandi nana abasibe bingi munonga abakuhingura murigana omuchome echa amuru so nchigambwa ngu hariho habasana n'okwija kubaho mass testing eyabasibe abingi na munonga abali mu district ya Amuru na nemyanya ejetoriro kubasa kureba yaba harimo abo abino obwiro bwa COVID-19 kandi kuba kubasa kuba barumu babase kugendo mission no kuba nabacheberwa babase kuba nibareba ngu tubarwaza batahi babo. tukiri aha bwire bw'obumwe obwa covid-19 nikigambwa ngu obwire obu bwahereze kurebeka hakindi ekitongole kya gavumenti ekirikumanya aha office ya public office ya finance eyabakozi eyababiiki aba gavumenti kandi omukuru Keith Muhakanizi omuhandiiki w'ekitongole ekyo abasize kuba nashoborera ngu hariho some of the staff members abahereze kushangwamu obulwire obwa covid-19 so hati obulwire obugenzire nibweyongyera omu bitongole nyamwingi tibiri na bya gavumenti byonka hariho nk'ebitongole eby'abamakuru hariho television eya NBS bahereze kushangaho abarwire ba covid-19 hariho television eyi barikweta BBS Telefina nayo eyina abarwire ba covid-19 bahereze confirming some cases and then hariho na vision group nayo bahereze kushangaho abamwe omu bantu abine obulwire bwa covid-19 then abasigire babateeka omu quarantine so obulwire nibugenda nibweyongyera kandi hati bugenzire niburumba public places ezitari zimwe na zimwe kandi bwagaruka bwasimbira kimwe amakanda omu bikuubo na no public transport omu rurembo orwa Kampala. Remember ngu yesterday izooba eryanyuma abazyo abarwire ababire bariho abine obulwire bwa covid-19 na hati niho turi kutambura ahabwokuba nekiraha okubasa ndikuba ninkusyaho amakuru ministry ey'ebyamagara yabeta akagenzero mu misho na nokuba ne updatinga abantu abe basize kushangamo obulwire bwa covid-19 omu izooba eryanyuma abazyo ebiro 224 ebyokwezi kwa munana omwaka gw'2020 so ntusigara turi kutambura habanyumazyo mtayi wanje urikize igani 2 light farmer ntusigara turi kutambura abanyumazyo abarkwinganura kimwe 22,223 kandi yesterday remember ngu bashangira abantu abarkwingana 9 ababene binganura kimwe 9 ababebe n'obulwire bwa covid-19 kandi abafire nibinganura kimwe mtayi wanje urikize abafire nibinganura kimwe abantu 22 abo nibo bahereze kuba nibitwa obulwire bwa nibinganura kimwe 22 abahereze kuba nibitwa obulwire bwa covid-19 kandi abakizire no 2026 aha omwihanga area Uganda. So any time from now we are standing warned ntumanya ngu omwebembezi wihanga anytime naija kuba na addressinga okubasa kugamba next step abwokuba obulwire hati bugenzire nibweyongyera atufikira level eyokureportinga nk'amahanga gandi akushanga ngu reportinga over 90 almost for 3 consecutive days nkiba nkimanyisa ngu obulwire bwagenda nibweyongerera kimwe kandi okukwata abantu nyamwingi. Ebyo bulwire obwo twabiteeka harubajuho kache eshonga endijo nekwatirine na nebyobutegeki biriyo mbigendo misho abekibine kya unity platform ahindi gambere bibarukuriya hambuga zabe nkuru omurakamocha kandi kozi izobe lya hate yabatekayo bariyo nibagendo misho na nokora fundraising okwenda kurebeka ngo bashoroza akasente karije kubanika bayamba omunshonga ezibyobutegeki. Remember ngu abantu aba bariyo nibakora ekyo okwenda kubasa enkore ya scientific campaign okubasa kurebeka ngo buri kimwe cyabagendera kurungi omukubasa kukora campaigns zabo kureka ngo nabo ba affordinga radios na TVs okubasa kuteka yo campaigns zabo. I'm coming back just in a click.
Mid-hour time check. It's 3:30 p.m. Merlin Chibota, or you will be trouble, and it's Bareka, or Sanaramba Ebendera, Aya NRM, Akaya Quatera, Abakaria Boshi, or Madishutia Casese, or Machaganda Chibolo.
Night Jovia. I know the Kiribu. Night Jovia. Night Jovia. Nguya kushemererwa.
Somen.
Yes Jovia. kandi mama tata ndakusaba ndugende sikyo muyiko bakakomera ukabiwa bere nariya mu mike yakuse kwa mukebwa wude nyinga ya umuntu byari ikinire wembara bari oburi mu bakesa amenya ko kusoda mu mike bakanya basita kutsema
Nimwe Mike Baganyono, nimwe mebete mubuya, telemo kasororo, kaikana ya mule muondo.
Alright, tugendo mission program light focus edakika nzo zarabamu mpora ashatu n'ibiri ezaraba mu rushaha mwenda zihangwe kandi tukiri aha on program y'amakuru ya light focus orinanye abutili a man of all seasons. Ahadakika zenyini reka tubase kuba ntushoboraho aheru yihanga eri ya Uganda tubase kureba amakuru okugemerire nyina amakuru mingi mnonga nyina amakuru kurugwo mu ihanga eri ya Mali where we had a coup d'etat rize kuba nekorwa not very many days ago kandi omwebembezi wihanga takari kwirwe abirari omwebembezi the former president wihanga eri ya Mali. And then nyina makuru okurugwo mu ihanga eri ya United States of America omwebembezi Donald Trump abasize kugendo mission no kudeployinga abantu be na manya hariho abantu bingi ababire nibamurabya mwamisho na mnonga b'ekibine kya Democrats nibagezaho kukastinga ebigambo byingi haruwe atakubagarukamo bundi arikubagarukamo wenka konka hati na waresera amahege aresere family ya leta bakamwana n'abatabani okubasa kugenda misho kumurwaniraho omurutaro orw'ebyobutegeki ebyo byona ntija ku bantu bitunga aha on program ya light focus. And then enshonge ndijo ekwatina n'ihanga ya Philippines barugire y'abakuru barangirira ngo they have succeeded omukurwanisa oburwiro bwa COVID-19 no kirabe kiringu yaye to find out abo kuba amahanga mingi agabasize kuba gargaga karangirira ngo gaherize kusingura oburwiro bwa COVID-19 ombwire butari bwahare tukagaruka tukareba oburwire bwagaruka kandi bwagarukamo ecyo kureberaho twinihanga area New Zealand bakargoye barangirira ngo oburwiro bwa COVID-19 babusingura bwahwaho omunsi yabo pepepe bwahweraho kimwe but hati nabo bagarukira mu lockdown kandi bo they are even better than Uganda abo kubabo hati babasize no kugaruka mu lockdown abo burwire obwa COVID-19 okubasa kugaruka mu busiya kandi bwine amane mingi twine ebintu byinje biturukwisha kubantu rebaho mu ihangiri ya America still hariho umuntu obagarukire bakatera amasasi owa black ningashi umuntu owo mbwirgo mwiraguju is an American African American kokora amwete bamtira amasase mirundo rukwingana mushanju konkata kafire kanda kirho aina magara marungi. And then tujagaruka turebe amakuru agakwatirine na nihanga area tujagaruka turebe amakuru agakwatirine na nihanga area Russia mukuru owubahira ubutwa opposition leader omuhangeri ya Russia amakuru agogona tujja kubantu genda kurungira go misho mpora ahahunka hariga nibiri katonyeza mwenda light farmer eshaheji rekambase kuba ninjendo mission no kwa updates eza makuru ago aguturkwija kubantu gambaho ningashagundu kwija kuba ninkuhereza izoberi ya hati kandi obase kugendo mission no gatunga live buterevu okuruga aha sources zago ahiga basize kuba naga happeninga light focus program mpaka shaikumi ezo mwabazi.
The shooting captured on mobile phone is difficult to watch. Jacob Blake, apparently unarmed, walks around his SUV, his 3 children unseen inside, seeming to ignore the police following behind. At the door, an officer grabs him by the shirt, his back to police. Police fire 7 shots. The shooting set off a night of protests in the streets, the city blocking roads with garbage trucks. Demonstrators set them on fire, leaving behind charred chassis, including a neighboring car lot, and a message on a courthouse wall. And let me be clear, this was not an accident. This wasn't bad police work. This felt like some sort of vendetta being taken out on our community. The officer's deadly actions attempted to take a person's life in broad daylight. The shooting drew condemnation from presidential candidate Joe Biden, who issued a statement saying, "The nation wakes up yet again with grief and outrage that yet another Black American is a victim of excessive force. These shots pierce the soul of our nation. Blake survived and is in stable condition. Jacob Blake's lawyer says he parked his car and got out at this corner in order to break up a street fight. And as he sought to de-escalate a conflict, police, for reasons that remain unexplained, treated him as a threat. The shooting of Jacob Blake adds to the anger over police brutality that erupted following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. The outrage that reverberated across the U.S. now engulfing Kenosha.
I was just at a loss for words. I sobbed. I just had to sit and gather my thoughts for a moment.
I can't speak for the Caucasian community. Maybe it's surprising to them. It's not surprising to me.
Despite a curfew and the arrival of the military troops of the National Guard to control the streets, protesters are continuing their demonstrations, demanding an end to a cycle of official violence against Black Americans in confrontations with police that could have ended peacefully, but didn't. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Now, today marks 3 years since Myanmar started a brutal campaign against Rohingya Muslims, which the UN described as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fled, and now almost 1 million people remain displaced in neighboring Bangladesh, unable to return home. Mohammed Jamjoon reports.
For the Rohingya, one of the world's most persecuted minorities, it often feels like the storms never end, as monsoon rains threaten to wash away what little these refugees have to hold on to.
Water enters into our shelter, and then worms get under our mats. We're facing so many problems.
Nordkis rebuilds and reinforces as best she can, but that brings little relief. She knows full well the hut will flood again, and realizes that, in a life full of temporary fixes, the only real constant for her is sadness.
There's a lot of hope forever. My heart burns for my country the whole night and day. When I try to sleep at night, the sleep doesn't come. Instead, my mind goes to Myanmar.
It's been 3 years since Myanmar's military launched a brutal crackdown against the Rohingya in Rakhine State. A campaign of mass killings, rapes, and arson that was quickly deemed by the United Nations to be a textbook example of ethnic cleansing, and one that forced close to 800,000 Rohingya across the border into southern Bangladesh. Myanmar denies charges of genocide at the International Court of Justice, saying its armed forces were conducting legitimate operations against what they called militants who attacked police posts. In the ensuing years, Bangladesh and Myanmar have attempted voluntary Rohingya refugee repatriations, but refugees have refused to go back, and observers say conditions remain unsafe for their return. With life at a standstill for the Rohingya, the makeshift camps grew into the world's largest refugee settlement, and conditions became ever more dire.
There's restrictions on every aspect of Rohingya refugees' lives. This includes restrictions on freedom of movement, restrictions on access to livelihood, and of course there's internet and communication restrictions right now.
Rahmatullah, like many other refugees, used to get a lot more work. That was before COVID-19 safety measures forced aid agencies to reduce their presence in camps. These days, he takes any job he can.
Now, because of the coronavirus, we can't go anywhere. We're not getting work opportunities of NGOs. That's made our living conditions much tougher.
Community leader Abdul Hamid says the time has come for the Rohingya to get the justice they deserve.
We are very thankful to Bangladesh and its public for hosting us, but we don't want to stay here anymore. We want to go to our place.
No one expects that will happen soon, but that won't stop the adults from searching for a solution, and it won't keep the children from finding ways to play. For in these camps, the suffering may be apparent, but the resilience is abundant.
Well, let's now speak to Mohammed Jamjoon, who's reported extensively on the forced displacement of the Rohingya from Myanmar. He joins us now here in Doha. Mohammed, you've spent so much time in those camps. It really doesn't feel like a lot's changed.
It hasn't, Nastasia. I'll tell you, the first time that I went for a reporting trip to Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, which is home of the world's